This piece of content is brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com and their Christmas sale. Use offer code BrokenSilicon to save 25% off all Microsoft products. And then also check out the Minis Forum Elite Mini AI370 powered by Zen 5 Strix. It's a fantastic mini PC that there is a mini review for later in the video, but we'll talk about that then. For now, let's just get on with the show. Welcome to Broken Silicon, a gaming hardware podcast. I am your host, Tom, and today I'm joined by someone who has been here around Christmas every time, actually, it turns out. Carbon Cry, who puts a lot of the notes together for the Moore's Law's Dead team. I put in there, there was a line on the early script, traditionally, our guest around Christmas, and Carbon Cry wrote under that, he's been here 6 times, including 2019 when the channel was started. So you could say it's traditional that you're here if you've been here literally every single time. But please introduce yourself, tell everybody what you do.
I am shocked that it's been 6 years. Sorry, I know that's not the introduction, but yes, I am Dawid. I do tech things. Not very well usually, but yeah, that's all I have to say about that.
I mean, I could do things pretty well. The things that aren't doing well, as I notice a lot of your videos are, and still continue to be, and I think that's fun, is this insanely stupid thing that they sell for too much. Is it actually as bad as you would think it is?
It always is. It's always at least as bad as you'd expect.
I actually haven't checked. I think I saw rumors of this RTX 4010 selling in Asia right now, and really
what?
A BIOS modded A4000 or something that they're calling the 4010 informally. Kind of like how if you go on AliExpress, you can find a 3070M and it's the laptop 3070, but they put it on a desktop board.
Yeah. I have one of those graphics cards, and they're surprisingly good value. If you can get over the weird virus drivers that you have to deal with. So the one that I had, it was you had a link on AliExpress that the seller sent you that you had to go onto a Google Drive of hacked drivers that they set up for you to use.
Can't you just use the normal NVIDIA drivers? Probably
it didn't work with that one. So I don't know if they fixed it since then, but that was my experience with one of those AliExpress hack jobs. But the 4010 sounds really exciting.
I'm not wrong. I can see you're probably Googling it.
Yeah. I'll see if I can find one.
So just to be clear, because when I saw 3070M, I never quite got one. I've done sponsorships before, and anytime they're like, what can we send you? I'm like, send me a 3070M. I want to actually test this. I never got sent one. But I assumed it would be good because you look at the specs of the 3070M, it's 3070. It's just clocked lower or something, or maybe 3060 Ti if I remember correctly. Actually, no, yeah, I think so. That's what it was. And you say it worked well, but so did you have to do something with the drivers or download them and then remove a virus, or how does it work?
No, you just have to pucker when you install the driver and hope there isn't. Yeah. But actually, I think it was a 3060M on a desktop PCB. Okay. Yeah, and it was really good value because it was way cheaper than a normal a normal version of the 3060, but you still got a lot of performance from it.
Do you remember how much cheaper?
I think it was $200 US.
Back in a time where those were $350 or something.
Yeah.
Okay, because I should be careful here. I don't want to start a fight with a company I don't mean to and can't 100% prove suspicions with.
Okay.
But there's a lot of mini PC companies, tons of them. I'm sponsored by Minis Forum a lot. Actually, there'll probably be an ad for them in this one. I love their stuff. I've got a Strix Zen 5 mini PC here. It's fantastic. Snappiest thing I've used. But importantly, they almost always, I believe, let you order it without the OS installed. And that's important because that kind of proves they don't need to put viruses on it. If usually they're selling it without Windows pre-installed, they don't care. But let's say there's many PC companies, some of them that are in a lot of sponsorships.
You mean Ace Magic, right? Is that
I'm not going to say who it is.
I don't mind saying it.
But let's put this, there's probably multiple of them. But let's say there was this one and I got it and it was a recent APU, won't say which one, just to also not narrow it down. And when I tested it, I was like, it's fine. And then I did a Windows scan and it was like, there's a virus on this. And so I checked, removed it. It seemed to be fine. I went to their website, top review on it. Mine had a virus on it. And then when I contacted them, they said, oh, these are just remaining testing files that we do.
Oh, and I'm
like, okay, I could buy that's true. But then again, unlike a lot of them, this one, they don't let you sell it bare bones. And it was $100 cheaper than everyone else with like the equivalent APU. And I'm like, so why is it so cheap? Is it because actually the profit is taking your data? And then I saw the review that was negative get removed from their website. And I'm like, God, why didn't I screenshot it? And so what I came to the conclusion on, I said, what I want you to do is send me 2 more, like from Amazon, so it's not from you. And I want to just send it. I have I'm friends with a boutique PC builder called Silver Knight PCs. They actually do a lot of contracts for government and stuff too. So they know how to check for backdoors. And I was like, I'm basically going to send it to them. If I find no viruses, I will believe you. But they didn't agree to do that. And then they also removed that review. And I'm like, I can't prove it because it's already been removed, but I think I'm going to have to pass. I'm going to have to go with the other mini PC sponsors or something, you know?
Yeah. No, that's why you always reinstall Windows on any device you buy. It's just like if you buy a pre-built or anything, you just got a fresh Windows all the way.
Well, I can agree that that's good advice. I still think a lot of YouTubers recommending, you probably still shouldn't recommend a brand that is trying to do that.
No, for sure. Yeah. No. If you know that they do have that on there, then
right. Yeah, which I will say, people think if I take there have been sponsorships where you never saw the ad for a reason or something. Let's see here. Severity writes in and says, I don't know if you will still get this or not, but here it goes anyhow. Oh, I think he submitted this at the last minute. Dawid, when using the vertical gaming mouse to play fast-paced FPS-style games, do you feel that if there was a mass-produced vertical gaming mouse, you may be inclined to use it? I ask because I really want to see a solid gaming mouse sensor in a vertical mouse chassis. I'm frustrated that there is no decent options to buy right now. So I actually had to look this up. So it's like you hold it like this, right?
Yeah, it's one of these. That it's like a...
Is that what you use by default?
So this is what I use in my editing PC. And then I've got like an MX Vertical, which is a bigger version of this that I use at home for gaming. And I actually put little like glass feet on it as well, so that because the stock feet suck on it. So I did a video where I 3D printed like an MX Vertical and then transplanted a Logitech gaming mouse's guts into it. And because I really badly want a gaming vertical mouse. Like it's just so much better for carpal tunnel and stuff.
I was gonna say, first thing I would guess is this removes carpal tunnel, right?
Yeah,
or prevents it.
Exactly. So my 3D printing job was a bit too ratchet for me to be like, I don't use it every day. So I still use the proper Logitech one. But when I play fast-paced FPS games, I switch to a normal mouse because the sensor isn't good enough. So yes, I would 100% buy the crap out of an actual gaming version of a vertical mouse.
So, and I'm guessing, childhood you used normal configured mouses, right? Like, was there any getting used to it, like having to use it vertically, or was it just instantly you were just as good at aiming? It wasn't a problem.
It took me a while. It took me about a week. But I also did I did a video on it like ages ago where I first transitioned to one, and I used Aim Labs, which is like aiming software that you can kind of practice your FPS aiming on.
Oh.
And after about a week, I was more accurate with the vertical mouse than I was with a standard gaming mouse shape. I wasn't as fast, but I was a bit more accurate.
Oh, it's probably more steady holding it like that too. Yeah.
Yeah, you've got really good control with it. So the problem with the MX Vertical is, again, that it's also very heavy. So there's a bunch of cons that they need to deal with, but I can't imagine it's going to be difficult for Logitech to do that.
Well, that's interesting. I didn't even, I've always seen these contrary or alternative shaped keyboards and mice. That one makes a lot of sense to me. Do you use a normal keyboard though? You don't do the like. I've seen some people insist on like split ones and like the stuff that's in like hacking video games. They always use some crazy looking keyboard.
Yeah. No. Because I don't. There's a lot less finger movement in my gameplay, and I don't type that much, so I still use a normal keyboard. Yeah, those are so crazy looking. Yeah.
I can't. I'm not going to get into it because if I say I can't imagine that really helps much, someone's going to send me 10 articles about actually why this is the best way to do it.
Yeah.
And that's why all of the hackers in the video game End War used a crazy looking keyboard in the cutscenes. So, all right. What I did, and I know it was a very intense list that I sent you, is I just, in preparation for this, where we look back on the previous year, this time it's 2024, I guess still technically current year, is I just all of the news leaks or big events that happened. And this one was a longer than usual list, I have to say. And I just asked kind of like, what were you interested in? And I've highlighted them. We'll get to them. But the first one was, I don't want to completely skip over quarter one. What is your memory of like the beginning of the year, super pricing leaks, the super cards came out, no one bought them, then some people did. And just, there was Meteor Lake, there was Hawk Point. I don't know, how would you summarize like how you felt about the first part of this year?
So I think with the Super, it was so consistently leaked that I think most people pretty much knew what to expect when the cards came out, and they were better. You got some better value for money, but people were still pretty, I think, just generally fatigued about how just frustrating all of the Nvidia launches had been before that. So it was better, and people were. It was just better, basically. But
well, that's an argument I've actually made a lot, is that I think some of the rage you see over price performance of some launches, a lot of it's warranted. I agree, this is stupid sometimes, but I think a lot of it is, if you actually align the price performance, it's actually in line with what you would have expected. But the reason they're still mad is I think people want an overcorrection to make up for the crap we had to deal with from 21 through 22. And there's been a little bit of it, I think, but I still think for a lot of people, they're like, are you kidding me? I had to deal with $800 3070 Ti 8 gigabytes. I'm not going to be happy until I see this someone make up for how much that sucked. I wonder how much you think some of that is that. And like, when they saw the Super, they're like, it's better, but you're starting from such a bad place. I don't really care.
Yeah, like that's what the card should have been when it was the non-Super version. And now, so I agree. That's a good point that, people kind of want Nvidia to beg a little bit because they've been so naughty. I agree with that point.
Yeah, I mean, I also thought it was funny, like, although like the 4070 Super, I believe I did an analysis video on this where I was like, we didn't need more frame rates. We needed this to actually have 16 gigabytes. But ultimately, I mean, it's sold okay. I mean, from what I hear, if you go to a Micro Center, like what the number one card's selling right now, like there's a lot of budget ones because like the 6600's down to 180, Battle Mage's now out now too. 3060s are down to like 250. But otherwise, it's pretty much the 7800 XT and 4070 Super. So I don't know if maybe you don't have any thoughts, but I thought it was interesting how much outrage there was online. And the 4070 Super, I was told, sold basically nothing. Pretty bad the first week, but that by now it sold okay. I don't know if it's just over time people waited, then they went into the store and they needed a card and they're like, screw it, I'll get it. Or I wonder what you think about how some of the card sales did eventually pick up.
Yeah, no, that's a fair assumption that people, because I think people have been setting off their GPU purchases for a long time because of, when the 20 series came out, people are like, I'm still going to use my 1080 Ti. When with every single launch, that was the case. And it's been years now. So they're just, I need a GPU. This is a 70 series card that is efficient and it performs decently. Why not buy it? I'm not as outraged about it anymore. Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah, I guess, do you think where things are right now is kind of where people will compare the next generation to? Or do you think where things are now, like, because right now I think the 7800 XT you can generally find it for $450. The 4070 Super occasionally below $600. The 4070 Ti Super, I've seen it for $750. I thought I saw an insane deal on WCFC where it was below $700. But those deals appeared, disappeared.
Mm-hmm.
Like 8800 XT comes out. Like, something that I always find so weird is like, when the 8800 XT comes out, where do you think they're actually going to compare it to? Are they going to compare it to the 7800 XT that launched at $500? Are they going to say, oh, well, it was $400 a month ago, so actually it needs to be cheaper than this? Or do you think they'll say, generally speaking, it was around $480, or actually in the beginning, the 7800 XT was above MSRP most of the time. Like, I'm wondering where you think people think, where do you think people think the mid-range, low-end, and high-end baseline is? It started Nvidia trying to make it $1,000. It started with this, trying to launch a 12 gigabyte 4080 for $800 or $900 actually. Yeah, it was $900. And then they changed course on that. What do you think most gamers are going to say high-end, mid-range, and low-end is? Because I know what my answer is, but I'm kind of wondering, you could maybe say what yours is, but what you think the average consumer is. Like, do people accept mid-range is now $500? Because it kind of is.
Yeah, $500, it feels rough to say that is mid-range, just because of, it was like $600. But inflation and stuff, it's really it's difficult to say what the market sentiment is going to be on it. But I think that at the moment you have a lot of sub $500 graphics cards, like with Battlemage, for example, that are very capable at gaming at 1440p, which I would consider the current like mid-range resolution to game at. So if you have GPUs that are sub $400 that can still give a very convincing gaming experience at that resolution, then yeah, I feel like that's still mid-range. Like, would you consider Battlemage mid-range?
No, I would consider it low-end actually, because it's competing with 2-year-old cards with small die sizes, for example, I like when people bring up the 4060. My opinion is Nvidia should have just called that the 4050 and say, suck it, nerds. We now sell the 50 for $300, because it's the 107 die. This is a 140 millimeter squared die that's smaller than an APU from a year ago that's in budget laptops. I think that's low end. And it's like, do I wish the low end was, I remember when you could get a 6670 for $80. Do I wish the low end was at a minimum below 150 still, and that now the $150 cards are just kind of unusable? I wish. But at the end of the day, if you're bragging about beating a 107 die that costs Nvidia peanuts to make, I think that's low end. And I also think when you look at 1440p, when do we just start saying that's not really a high resolution anymore? If you have consoles starting to brag about 4K above 60 hertz, I think that's the mid-range. Aren't the consoles what set the standard of what mid-range is? That's what I would argue.
Okay, that's a good point. Yeah, and the thing is, 1440p is also, in terms of displays and stuff, is affordable to get into now. It's
very affordable. It's kind of budget.
Yeah, you don't. It's not a wild proposition buying even an IPS high refresh rate 1440p display. So yeah, maybe I need to readjust my expectations of what I consider mid-range. But I just looked at an inflation calculator. So I don't know how useful that is for this kind of thing. But if you look at the pricing of the RX 580, when it came out, its MSRP was $230, and that was like gold tier mid-range GPU. And in today's money, that's $300. So for $300, I don't know if any of the GPUs that fall there,
I wouldn't call that budget. I would call that lower mid-range. Okay. And I also remember a time where low end didn't always mean the worst. It was just like, honestly, I could make the logical argument. Here, it could be this simple. The 4090 uses 80-102. The 4080 uses 103. The 4070 uses 104. Then 106 is the 60 Ti and 107 is the 60. which die is in the middle.
Yeah.
I could argue they can, who knows, next gen, maybe they'll call the 106 die the 4090 Ti and 5090 Ti, and then you just can't buy the top one. I don't really think that's what's going to happen. But it's like, at the end of the day, I think you look at the dies by the dominant player, which, let's just admit it, is definitely Nvidia at this point.
Yeah.
What's in the middle? And if they charge more for it, some of it is because 4 nanometers more expensive. Sure, I'm not gonna, rage that we need to burn down capitalism, but at the same time, I go, I don't know if it costs that much to make it though, Nvidia. So, but that's where I go on it too, and then I also go, I think we also have to remember that, like, I'm sure this is something me and you have talked about before, like low end cards. Like I say, I miss the days where you could get an HD 6670 for $80 or $100 really, probably. But at the same time, I think gamers were bragging that could do almost 720p 6010. It's like, even just with APUs now, it gives you a pretty consistent experience that you didn't really have with low end cards before.
Yeah, I mean, even so, the video that I'm currently working on is I rebuilt a high end gaming system from 2005 to play Black and White 2 on, which is like my favorite game ever. I love that game. And after a whole bunch of struggle to get this thing to get this setup running, because XP is a nightmare now. But this is high-end hardware from the same year this game came out, and it was struggling to give 30 frames per second at 720p medium settings. And it was a graphics card that cost $700 back then, which today is $1,000.
Yes.
So what we get out of the hardware has gone so much further. That's a good point. What you were getting from that $80 graphics card was not what you were getting with more budget-focused hardware today.
And you could say, like, I remember my brother we had like a Core 2 quad that I was going into engineering, my parents knew, after high school. So they're like, well, let's get a desktop for the house where he could practice 3D modeling. So I think I had a Core 2 Extreme quad core. I don't know the graphics card, but I remember it running Mass Effect on high or ultra, so it seemed to be fine.
Okay.
If I had to guess, it had, what era would this have been? If I had to guess, it had something like a 2050, 60, 40, like somewhere in the mid-range or Tesla era, like mid-range from Nvidia, if I had to guess. And then it broke because it's Dell, so of course it did. Especially back then, God. And what they sent us back years after we had gotten it actually had a Nehalem i7 920, which is quite an upgrade from the Core 2 quad. But then we found out, I think it came with a GT 310M dedicated card. 310.
Whoa.
M dedicated. And it couldn't run anything. And my brother ended up using it when I went to college. And I told him, why don't you just try getting an HD 6450, half a gigabyte card for $40? All of a sudden, all of his games ran better than a PS3. But, at the same time, the PS3 was chugging at 720, 24 frames a second. It was like 8 years old. Like, so it's definitely all relative,
Yeah, for sure.
And speaking of my brother, he just RMA'd, unfortunately, 7900 XTX. And he has a backup 6400 that I just gave him because I need to make sure he can have replacement parts because we record a podcast.
Yeah.
And we booted up Age of Empires 4, and I was like, I don't know, try 1080p low, and it's just like locked at 144 hertz on this puny 4 gigabyte card. So the low end has come a long ways, I think.
Oh, for sure, yeah.
All of this long-winded trip down memory lane is what I'm trying to say. But all right, let's get to one of the things you did say you definitely wanted to talk about. One of the things you highlighted was, I just kind of combined them because you highlighted the PlayStation Handheld leaks, which seem to be picking up in veracity. You highlighted the PlayStation 5 Pro leaks and launch. I'm also just throwing Nintendo Switch 2 in there. So this has been a console-heavy leak year with a PS5 Pro, no Series X Elite, though. Like, what made you think this was one of the more interesting developments of this year?
Well, it was fascinating to see the instant out. Okay, so the main reason that I wanted to talk about it was because there was this huge outrage around the pricing and stuff of it, which I still agree with. And then, the reviews and stuff weren't super positive. But in the notes, you were saying that it's selling pretty well. So what's up with that? It was basically, that was the main reason that I was interested in that part of it was, yeah, why are people buying it?
Well, so I think it's for a few reasons that, because like the initial thing, I remember my initial reaction to it as well was pretty negative. I mean, if anything, just because I was surprised. I mean, I remember when I saw 700, I'll say this, I was sure they weren't going to give you a disk drive because they had already removed it from the other version. So I don't know why you would include it. Like, just make it cheaper and don't have a disk drive. They can just buy the same one. And I think actually my suspicion, and this is a good thing, I think, for gamers, I have a suspicion that the PlayStation 6 will support discs, but it's going to use the same disk drive that came with the PS5, and you'll just have to buy it separately or something.
Okay.
And the reason I suspect that is the disk drive sold out and we're getting scalped. So I think this was a test by Sony. Do you really care about physical? And the market said yes. So I think they're not going to include a disk drive moving forward, but they're going to have it, which I think is an important price a check on pricing, because as long as you can go to eBay and get, I don't know what game, Destiny 2 for $5 on disc, that stops them from continuing to charge too much for games that are older. And I always think that it's good to have a check on physical media access, kind of a check on the power of these companies, if you will.
For sure.
Something that the only reason we don't have this issue on PC is because Valve seems to be nice.
Yeah,
I mean, but if they weren't, they could just charge $40 for Half-Life 2. Where else are you going to get it? But
yeah, I mean, they're a private company, so that I think that plays a big role. They don't have shareholders to bow down to. But the whole physical media thing, I will not buy a console that doesn't have a disc drive on it, because I still use the Blu-ray player to watch Blu-rays on. Because every time that I think I pay for 2 or 3 streaming services at the moment for like movies and stuff. And the moment that the movie that I don't want to watch isn't available on one of them, I will go buy the Blu-ray, because it's the same price as renting it from Google. So I'm like, no, I'm going to buy the physical media. Screw you. So I have a pretty big Blu-ray library. So for me, the Blu-ray player is a minimum requirement on a console, because that's one of the things that I primarily use it for. So I'm not happy that you have to buy it separately, but if it does make the console cheaper, then fair enough.
Well, and they're removing it from the Series X and the Series S, and there's no way to add one. So, I mean, we can see the writing on the wall where that's going. So I think that's a silver lining to the outcome. I think gamers voted with their wallets and voted that we're going to get 80% digital, but we want the option. We want the option. Now, I remember saying if this doesn't sell out within a week, that the PlayStation 5 Pro must not be doing very well. But maybe that's just pandemic mindset. Maybe not everything has to sell out on day one. And what it turns out is, what they've reported is it's matching PS4 Pro sales, if not exceeding them, and that they just made a ton of them, just a ton of the PlayStation 5 Pro. And that on top of that, there's an argument that some of it was like I don't like phrasing it this way, but I think there has to be some truth that they said the scalpers are going to sell this for, if we make this $500, the scalpers are going to sell this for $700. So let's put it at the price. And another silver lining was we did get to watch scalpers become forced to sell the PS5 Pro below MSRP after a week, which was certainly a fun thing to watch. But, why is the PS5 Pro selling well? I just think there's a disconnect between what a lot of people say online and what happens in reality. And I think it came out and people did actually want it. And I think if you haven't bought a PlayStation 5 yet, although they've kind of just dropped the price on it to $380, so I guess it's cheaper now, but without a disc drive. But that if you don't own it yet, I mean, how much do you spend on games a year for some people? If it's even 4 games, that's $280 a year. Or, maybe some of them aren't $70, but you probably spend $100, $200 on games a year, a lot of people in the mainstream. And so if they're like, well, I don't own a PlayStation yet, I can spend $380 plus $80, so $460 for the normal, or I can get the version that has double the performance for for what I spend in games in 1 year or so. I think that's why it's selling well, and there's, a lot of disposable income out there right now. So I also think that's why it's doing well. But this is another thing I said this year. if the PS5 Pro sells absolutely terrible, I bet the PS6 is 550 or 600. If it sells crazy well, which I don't know it's quite there, I bet the PS6 is 900 or 800 bucks. I think what Sony found is $700 is a price people will pay, and that's probably what the PlayStation 6 is going to sell for. I mean, wouldn't you agree if this is selling, if they got the supply demand curve right, they're going to go, all right, $700 for the next one.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that makes complete sense. The Pro variant of a console is a really good way to test what pricing the market will bear, because it's not as, I don't think it's necessarily as important for it to succeed wildly like a number-based console. So yeah, that makes sense to me. I am curious.
And there's no way around it too. I look, if the Xbox Series S, which doesn't allow you to have a disk drive, is 4 teraflops, it's weaker than the APUs you can get right now. And like, honestly, some $300 laptops, like if they keep selling the Series S for $350, which so far I think they are, I just can't help but think Sony's like, yeah, the PS5 is $380 because we're charging at least 10% more than that. And if the 2 terabyte Series X is $600, they're going to go, okay, well, ours is RDNA 4 and can do all these things better. We're going to charge an extra $100, dude, or something. And before you get the disk drive. So I don't know. I just also think it's a kind of a lack of competition from Xbox that made Sony go, if the PlayStation 5 Pro falls flat, it's worth to test to see if we can get away with this, and I don't know. I mean, I think if Xbox was being more competitive, I do think it would be cheaper though.
Yeah. When you started mentioning the Xbox, I was like, oh yeah, there's another console. I forgot about that. Like that's the same generation, like they're definitely not competitive. So that's when pricing goes up. And the thing is, like, again, every time, like, I find inflation calculators very interesting, because if you type PS3 pricing into an inflation calculator, you get some wild numbers back. So that was a very, very expensive console.
I mean, I remember N64 games that were like $70, like Pokemon Stadium, because you had to use some attachment, that came with it, or even just a lot of other N64 games. Some of them will go for $100, which in today's money is like, what, 150 or something? So, on the one hand, it's like, yeah, I was kind of shocked by the $700 price, which is $780 after adding the disk drive. At the same time, having used one a decent amount, I can go, I mean, it kind of games like a $1,000 PC or something. I think they just look around at $1,500 iPhones and go, look, unless Xbox puts a gun up to our head, this is the price now. So, and it kind of is what it is. I think there's, again, I think $2,000 5090s are probably the more annoying thing for me. But before we move on to that, though, I do want to ask you about... This piece of content is brought to you by CDkeyoffer.com. Just in the past few weeks, Dan built a new PC with a fresh install of Windows 11 on a blazing fast Gen 5 NVMe SSD. And of course, that code for Windows 11 came from CDkeyoffer.com. And we've been using CDkeyoffer.com at Moore's Law Z for a very long time. I use it for my office software on both my desktop and my laptop, and that's because they're reliable. They've always been there for us, and they offer reasonable prices for Microsoft products that are usually set, in my opinion, at monopolistic pricing. And they're actually having a Christmas super sale right now. So if you're looking to get the best pricing on Microsoft software or games or other products on their website as well, please show support for a company that's shown support for the Moore's Law is Dead team and community for years by using offer code BROKENSILICON to get 25% off all Microsoft software and DieShrink to get 3% off everything else. So support Moore's Law is Dead by checking out CDkeyoffer.com today. You also mentioned the PlayStation Handheld, though. What interests you in that? Because that was I believe I was the channel that leaked that first. That was a big deal. And since then, more and more people are piling on that this seems to be happening, which I think is interesting. What do you think about that?
Well, I think it's cool that because there's this huge resurgence in handhelds, like after the Steam Deck came out and the Switch and stuff, people realized that that's actually a really good way to game. And there's quite a lot of love for the PS Vita and stuff, like the older PlayStation handhelds at the moment. People will buy them on eBay and still use them. So I think that if they can actually get a PlayStation handheld out these days, people would really enjoy it, because my theory is that because of how much more powerful this mobile hardware is, they're not going to have to make their like special handheld games necessarily for it. Because that was one of the issues with the PS Vita, is they struggle to get people to develop games for it. But
and why would you? It's going to sell better on PS4. Like, why bother?
Exactly. So now, with that issue potentially eliminated, like if that's something that they don't have to do, I think it's going to be a much more popular device. And yeah, it's like a mobile PlayStation. It's cool.
Yeah, and I wonder what your opinion is on this, because so the original leak I put out about it, it was that this is an early design phase. They have several concepts. They're not really sure what it's going to be. So yeah, maybe it's just runs PS4 games, which run on PS5 as well. Maybe it's a PS5 capable handheld, that can run PS5 games. Kind of like if you have a game and you develop it for PS5, there's like a box you check for PS5 Pro, and then you just have to double check something. Like most devs don't have to put in any effort to enhance the game. Like maybe there's another checkbox for PS5 handheld where it's just like, just make sure it runs at half the resolution, whatever.
Yeah.
But I also think there's an option for a PS6 handheld, because I know this isn't coming out for at least 2 years. So the problem I have, certainly I have a problem with a PS4 launching in 2 years. That doesn't make any sense to me.
Yeah.
But even a PS5, it's like, isn't that around when the PS6 is going to come out? Are we actually going to launch a PS5 handheld when the PS6 launches? Maybe. I mean, they still make PS4 versions of games. But at the same time, I can't help but wonder, like, is this secretly their idea for like a PlayStation Series S? Like, are they making a smaller APU version of the PS6 that happens to work in a handheld? Or my fantasy idea was they use the full 2nm dies for the base console for the PS6, and they just disable them by 20% and clock them lower and just use the same APU for the handheld. And that way, if it doesn't sell well, who cares? We didn't make a separate APU. It could be a limited edition run, which means maybe people would buy it because they think it's not going to be produced for long. I'm wondering what direction you would think they should go in.
Well, I was thinking that because adding it to the kind of numbered generation of at-home consoles could make it sketchy, like you were saying. 2 years from now, is it a 5 or a 6? So they can go potentially the like Vita route and just have it be a PS handheld, like a separate thing that isn't necessarily tied to the generation of the consoles in terms of like name and culture or whatever. But having a just slightly stripped down or clocked down version of the PS6 APU in there would make a lot of sense from a manufacturing perspective and a performance perspective, because you'd have a little monster on your hands, and that would be cool. Like
I think the marketing would write itself, right? Because you don't need to say the PSP 2 or the Vita 2. You just say, no, this is the PlayStation 6, but this is the handheld version. It's the same name. It's just the PS6 handheld.
Yeah. That'll be cool.
And I don't know if that's what they'll do. I don't know. But I would just, man, if I was in that boardroom, I'd be like, come on. They're like, the Steam Deck's, the nice OLED version's like, what, $500? I'm pretty sure the Switch 2 is going to be $400, a lot weaker. And then there's already these boutique handhelds that are like, what, $1,000? Why can't we just take this APU that we're putting in the $700 PS6, take the bad yields of it, and then, clock it lower, and we'll add the screen, and it'll be an $800 handheld, but it has no compromises. I just think that would sell. And the best part of that is because it's literally a PS6, you don't need to make separate software. You don't need to do anything. It's just booting into a screen with a battery in it. You just write one little part of the OS to allow for a battery, like a laptop. And then even if it falls flat in sales, there's no extra work to support it. It's a PS6, So I don't know. That's what I'm hoping for. And the idea is pretty, I know a lot of people where they'd probably just get it to leave in their like go bag for when they go on trips, so they don't need to think, oh, should I bring this, a laptop or that? It's just always in there, kind of like a Steam Deck or Switch.
And it can also potentially be like a budget alternative to the PS6, so that if it's dockable or whatever, then you can like also use it as your at-home console, so that you don't need both.
And by then, I would imagine, I don't know how strong the PS6 will be. I have to imagine minimum 4 times stronger than the PS5 or something. At least double PS5 Pro with, of course, probably extra AI features or whatever.
Always.
But so, if the PS6 handheld is kind of like the Series S, where like the Series S was an Xbox One X, but better CPU. If that's all it manages to do, I could see a lot of people just getting the handheld and then plugging an HDMI into it as well, because they're like, oh, it's only as strong as a PS5 Pro. Oh no, my games will run in 1800p instead of 4K. I don't know. I think a lot of people won't care, and they'll just get that for the portability, and that we're getting to this point where image quality looks good enough anyways.
Oh, for sure. Yeah, that was one of the things, because when I tried the PS5 Pro, I was like, but PS5 already looks really good. It's like this level of hardware is already a real beast.
And now, before people call us console fanboys, you know what also looks better? Yes, my 4090 PC looks better, everybody. I'm not saying, but for most people, I think that level of image quality is good enough. And, I mean, what is it, like The Last of Us Part 2 went from like a shaky 4K 60, because it supports VRR. So if you turn on VRR, like FreeSync mode, it actually mostly is above 50 frames per second in 4K. And then the PlayStation 5 Pro mode went to higher image quality in like kind of 4K 80, sometimes hits 100. Resident Evil 8 hit 4K 120 if you turn off ray tracing locked, or 4K 100 with ray tracing on, which is impressive.
Yeah.
And the funniest thing is, though, the game that still is probably the best looking game on PlayStation 5 is Demon's Souls.
Oh, okay.
I almost couldn't tell the Pro version because it already just looked too good. So I have to imagine there's a lot of people thinking that. Like, will I be able to tell the difference? Because actually the best looking game didn't get much of an enhancement, because I can't tell the difference. It just looks good to me.
Yeah, no, I tested it in VR, and it made a difference, because, in VR you can really tell the frame rate and stuff, but it was...
Tried what in VR?
So the PS5 Pro, I compared just the standard PS5 to the PS5 Pro using PSVR 2.
For like Resident Evil 8 or...
Yeah, Resident Evil.
Okay, I thought you said Demon's Souls. I'm like, what mod?
No, not the
VR
game.
Demon's Souls.
No,
okay, go on. Resident Evil 8. Okay.
Yeah, just like generally. And yeah, like you could tell as in GT7, especially because it has they added like they added a VR feature which helped with like upscaling and stuff, and it made a bit of a difference, but I wouldn't sell my PS5 to buy one. It's not enough of a difference for me.
So, all right. The last thing for this section, and maybe you don't have any thoughts. Any thoughts on the Switch 2?
Yeah, so I'm always pretty indifferent to the hardware specs of a Nintendo console. I feel like we've had this conversation last time potentially about it, because Nintendo games are so not graphic related. It doesn't really matter what Mario looks like, to me at least. So I think as long as they have a really nice display on it, that's kind of the thing that is the most important to me, and the ergonomics of the actual handheldness of it, because the Switch is pretty butt cheeks. So I'm more interested in that than the performance of the chip in there. But yeah, what are they? Is it going to be a huge jump over the standard?
Yeah, but look, it'd be impossible for it to not be. I mean, it's Maxwell with 256 CUDA cores. I mean, we're talking is what the original Switch is. Yeah, I mean, that was another thing that I put out, and I actually got this information and from someone at Nvidia, and that's why I find it interesting. Is I'm not going to get it, but I think, looking at what they're deciding, because like I just like talking about specs, and Nintendo makes very interesting decisions, shall we say, with their specs sometimes. Like, really, we're going with Maxwell in 2016. Interesting. Not even Volta, or let alone Pascal, but we're going to go with Maxwell. Or the Wii U used HD 4000 graphics a year before HD 7000 PS4 launched. I'm like, you couldn't have spent $20 to not use like an architecture from 2008, but or maybe it was 2009. I don't know. It doesn't matter. But yeah, I mean, it's based on Ampere. So
okay,
yeah, I know, and it's 1536 CUDA cores, so massive jump in CUDA cores.
Yeah, wow, that's huge.
12 gigabytes of RAM. So enough, I think enough RAM. And there are some Lovelace enhancements, mostly for efficiency. The original design, I know 100% was on 8 nanometer. But here's the thing, and this is something I reported a year ago by now, or almost a year ago. The people I talked to at Nvidia thought the Switch 2, or I think it should be called the Super Switch, thought it was going to launch early this year or late last year.
Oh,
I mean,
okay.
it uses Ampere. They said the design was done in 22, I think. Like, so
Okay.
no one knows why Nintendo is waiting so long to launch this thing. And so I don't know. Look, it'll be strong enough to run Nintendo games, but I have to say 1536 CUDA cores of kind of Ampere plus, if you want to let me call it that. I think that would have been really awesome 2 years ago. That would have been graphics above the Steam Deck. The CPU would be a little weaker because it's an off-the-shelf ARM core, but compared to Zen 2 and the Switch, I mean, in the Steam Deck, I always do that mistake. Yeah. But now that it's coming out and it's going to be competing with Strix handhelds that admittedly will cost 3 times as much, I know it's just like, I really think it would have come off as a very premium device. But now, unless they've die shrunk it, to Samsung 7 nanometer or something, I do think it will just come off as solid. But I wonder what you think. I mean, the performance will be, I think, graphics, a bit better than the Steam Deck. CPU a little bit weaker. 12 gigabytes of RAM, so enough for Nintendo games, I think.
Yeah, that's decent.
I think the way I would put it is, academically, it's fun to talk about its specs, but I'm no longer interested because it should have come out 2 years ago.
Yeah.
I do think my girlfriend will like this a lot, though.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's going to sell wildly. It's a Nintendo console. I think probably the only reason they haven't launched it yet is because they're still struggling to keep up with demand of the normal Switch. Nintendo's a money printing factory, and it's kind of I think that it different rules apply to it in terms of how the market interacts with it, and I think that's why they're like, if we can save 3 cents on a chip that's half the power, the shareholders will love that. So let's do that. People are still going to buy it.
And I have to believe that a big reason they went with Samsung 8 nanometer, and I would be blown away if they went with TSMC. And the only reason I say that is it's been so long since the original design that who knows if they changed something by now. But they don't have to worry about capacity anymore. Samsung's shutting down fabs right now because no one wants to use their nodes. So I know it's a budget node, but that means they can make as many Switch 2s as they want for the next 5 years. And I think that's going to be a big difference with this one as well, as it should be easy to get. We all know Nintendo also hoarded the Wii, so it was hard to get. So if they want to, they can make as many of these as they want for a very long time. And so from that respect, I don't think it's stupid, actually, that they're going with Ampere.
No, that makes sense. Yeah.
All right. So speaking of APUs, though, other things that you flagged that were from the middle of the year were, and some of it is recent, but the first Medusa leak I put out for Zen 6 was in the middle of the year. That was next to the 5080 16 gigabyte, 5090 24 gigabyte laptops. I think this was a summer of a lot of APU leaks and handheld leaks and stuff. And so moving on from consoles, though, I mean, like, what gets you excited about Zen 6 Medusa and, mobile Blackwell?
So mobile Blackwell, it's such a good look at just what the GPUs in laptops are going to be for the next generation, because that's usually they're just the Nvidia ones. I did see that they were saying the 5060M was potentially going to be an 8 gig card again, which is
I believe it. Yeah, I think so.
Yeah, which is a bit of a shame, although it was very fast memory. So I think it's like GDDR7 at 28 gigabits per second. Someone really, really high. So yeah, I'm curious to see to what extent that kind of helps offset the problem of just 8 gigs of video memory. But yeah, I'm just always interested to see what the next gen of laptop GPU is going to be, and I'm always interested in APUs because it's just insane how powerful tiny PCs are getting, and every time there's a jump in performance, that's a good thing. We're getting closer to just being able to game off a mini PC at this point.
Yeah, and I'll tell you what I expect. So I've actually leaked a picture of the die of the 5080, so it is the same die size as the 4080s. And I also know someone testing laptop variants that have 24 gigabytes.
Okay.
And so when I see that, I go, okay, so GDDR7 lets you have 3 gigabyte modules instead of 2.
Okay.
My guess is what they're going to have is the full. And again, they might just give it 24 gigabytes on desktop. I don't know, but I'm guessing on desktop there will be the 5080 16 gigabyte, probably for $1,200 to $1,300 or something. And then I think they'll take that and give it the 3 gigabyte modules with 24 gigabytes and call that a laptop 5090.
Okay.
And then I think they will cut that down, give it 16 gigabytes, laptop 5080. And then the 5060, my suspicion is this time it will use the 106 die, which, like you're saying, this must be what, I don't know what this rumor is you saw, but I bet this is what it was talking about. The 106 die will support GDDR7. The 107 die, I believe, is just GDDR6. Okay. So what I think they're going to do is I think they'll launch the 5060. And again, this is speculation. Who knows? We're pre-recording this a week before it comes out. Maybe I'll be an idiot right when this drops. Forgive me in the comments for once if I am. But my guess is the 5060 laptop, yes, we'll get 8 gigabytes because it's using the initial GDDR7 modules. But I would not be surprised if they wait for the 3 gigabyte modules to launch it to desktop with 12 gigabytes.
Okay.
Because they could do one or the other. And let's be honest, they'll probably do both, knowing NVIDIA. They'll probably have the $300 or $329 8 gigabyte, but then the $400 5060 12 gigabyte. At least I think it would be suicide to not do that. I mean, 8 gigabytes is just not enough, I don't think, anymore, even for low end.
Yeah, no, for sure. And yeah, NVIDIA loves launching several versions of the same GPU or several different versions of a graphics card under the same name. That really is their favorite thing to do. So if there's an option for that, I'm sure they'll take it. No, you're right. Well, I mean, 12 gigs, that's better. That's better than 8. it's getting there.
And yes, I think they'll charge $400 for that. That would be my guess. But if we're being honest, I don't remember the specs of it off the top of my head. My memory is it was like 4600 to 4800 CUDA cores. So that's like 4060 Ti CUDA cores.
Okay.
But with Blackwell's architecture, and like you say, with like 40, 50% more bandwidth, I still think this would probably beat the 4060 Ti by at least 10, 20%. And that would get it to, maybe you're getting 80% of a 4070 with 12 gigabytes for $400. It is an improvement in price performance technically or something. If that's, or maybe even 90% of a 4070, so if they pull that off, it's probably going to consume only 150 watts. I could see that doing well at $400, to be honest, if that's what they decide to do.
Yeah. I mean, that doesn't, when you especially like 4070-ish performance, like, yeah, that's not too bad. And I really like the strong efficiency of NVIDIA GPUs. Like it's to me, it's a bit of a selling point because summer gets hot and having a hot graphics card in the room isn't super fun. So yeah, that's cool.
But yeah, so I don't know. I that's where I kind of see it next gen, and God knows what they'll charge for their laptop versions. I know when Lovelace first came out, they were just like 4090 laptops for like $5,000 or something silly.
Yeah, it's like 9-bit buses. They really enjoy that.
But what's going to matter is how well AMD can compete in APU. They'll have Strix Halo coming out with 40 compute unit APUs at the beginning of next year. I mean, they'll probably be announced a week or two after we release this episode. So that's going to be fun to see.
Yeah.
It was funny, though. I remember us last year talking about it. And it just got delayed a year. So I don't know how much we have to talk about that. But like, what makes you excited about Zen 6 Medusa? Because I don't know if you saw it, but I have someone who was working on it. They sent me the schematics. I saw a 12-core chiplet connected to an APU IO die. And I think that's what it's going to be with Zen 6. It's 12 cores and full 12 cores. None of them are little.
Yeah.
With what seems like 16 compute units of RDNA 5 or something. So I think that's pretty exciting. And I also think that's exciting because what does that probably mean? Probably 24 cores on AM5. Finally, we're going past 16. Yeah. So what do you think about that though?
Yeah, like the jump to more cores on a chiplet is awesome. And that APU sounds like a monster. I'm excited. You said it's beginning of next year potentially that they're going to be announcing it.
The one I just said, Zen 6. No, if I had to guess, it's CES the following year, or maybe or maybe Q3. So I don't think it sounds that crazy when you're like, oh, so it's a year at least from now, probably.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
But I still think it's exciting to have some confirmation that we're finally going past those core counts, though.
Yeah, because it's been 16 cores for ages now.
Yeah. Which, hey, what's the best-selling CPUs on Amazon? 8 cores. So the market is not telling AMD they want more cores.
Yeah.
But yeah, actually, let me get into this as well. Quick Jumper writes and it says, I'm actually very excited for upcoming Nvidia CPUs. What price range do you expect Nvidia to target? And so that was another big thing. There's been rumblings about this for a while. I've got on good authority. This might surprise you. By the end of next year, if not first half of 26, Nvidia wants to be making laptops with their own CPUs. So what do you think about that?
Yeah, so I mean, they're going to be ARM based, right?
That is what I believe. So yes.
So
well, I know. So yes.
Yeah, that gets me more interested in it, because having someone like Nvidia back ARM hardware for Windows might get better software support for it. Because like with the Snapdragon launch and stuff, it's really interesting. Like ARM chips are awesome, but there's a bit of a support issue with Windows with it. So having more people like funneling money into it might lead to better support, which will be very good. So I think it being an ARM chip is awesome. I think it probably means it's going to be on a like cheaper end because of potential support issues, but it's Nvidia, so it's probably going to be a lot. I don't know.
Well, that's the funny thing, right? My gut reaction when I saw this too, and just so you know, it's targeting 4070 laptop performance for the GPU, powerful NPU. Of course, it's NVIDIA. They're going to say AI everywhere.
Yeah.
At first, I was like, it's NVIDIA, so of course they're going to want to pretend this is like a Mac competitor for $4,000. But then I went, maybe not, though. I mean, if what I was told is that it had 4090 laptop performance and for the graphics, I would immediately go, yes, they're going to charge them arm and a leg for this. But they choose how big to make the APU. If this thing is targeting 4060 Ti performance, and they know that it will be their biggest brand is gaming, that'd be the best way to try to convince gamers to give them a chance with ARM.
Yeah.
I actually think I agree that I'm slowly convincing myself that I actually think maybe they are going to target $1,000, $1,200 laptops with this, because if we're being honest, that's kind of the only place this would make sense.
Yeah. Unless Windows had really good ARM support, then they could go buck wild on it. But I think because you're still essentially using a beta, like, I mean, I don't know what it's going to look like in a year and a half, but I think it's going to be very difficult to justify high-end pricing for a product that has shoddy software implementation, like integration. So yeah.
But we ought to admit, we do kind of think NVIDIA will get the software right. And if they do, man, did they time the market perfectly. They just let Qualcomm eat all the shit.
Yeah.
And then when Windows on ARM works, boom, NVIDIA drops with something even better and takes all the market.
Yeah, so that's when you said that, or when you said that it's about a bit over a year from now. It's like, okay, well, maybe it is going to be in a position where they can charge a lot for it. So yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that turns out, because ARM is awesome, and I'm excited for them to become a viable thing to use on Windows.
Because that just gives us more competition, and it's just to me funny. Like, even if Intel seems to be falling apart, it's like, well, get ready. I've also heard, and I put this out, that an industry veteran that came on the show said he's heard this as well a week ago, or I guess when this comes out 2 or 3 weeks ago, that ARM might make dedicated graphics cards too. So it's like, I don't think we have to worry about competition. Same with PlayStation. Valve's rumored to be working on a main console. So if Xbox, then Valve will compete with PlayStation. I think what we should just be ready for over the next few years is like, every now and then there's no competition for like 6 months until one company makes extra money. But ultimately, someone's going to fill that vacuum. If it's not Qualcomm, maybe NVIDIA will just make CPUs and ARM will make GPUs. I mean, I honestly think long term, we don't have that much to worry about here. I think we're going to have a lot of competition pretty soon.
Yeah, that's always exciting.
This piece of content is brought to you by Minis Forum and their Elite Mini AI 370 PC. This thing doesn't hold back on anything. It comes equipped with a 12-core Zen 5 APU that is then also powered by 32 gigabytes standard of LP DDR5X 7500 and up to 4 terabytes of NVMe storage that is, of course, user upgradable. And I have extensively tested it over the past month, and well, here are the results on screen. As you can see, it crushes previous gen integrated graphics and even dedicated cards like the GTX 1650, and not a normal one that's running at 120 watts with GDDR6. And then it also trades blows with an overclocked 6500 XT. And yeah, look, while the 2060 is a bit more than 20% stronger than these integrated graphics, I don't feel like that tells you the whole story just because on average you get to that level of performance win. You see, in real world usage, I can honestly say that this mini PC and its 890M graphics do feel like a dedicated RTX 2060 or 3050 half the time, and often better. Like in Deep Rock Galactic, for example, I had no trouble gaming in 1440p 60 Ultra. And in Battlefield 2042, I was incredibly surprised to find that it did 1080p 60 medium easily in a 128 player room. Now, did that make it beat a dedicated desktop 3058 gigabyte? No, but it did seem to beat the mobile 3050 in my brother's laptop easily. And it also crushed my old 2060 laptop in Battlefield 2042 because, well, my old laptop with an i7 ran into CPU bottlenecking in high player count rooms and VRAM issues. And that's the thing with this APU. You're not going to run out of VRAM. The CPU is crazy powerful. And so even though you might have to turn down some more settings than you might with like a 2060 laptop half the time, it's going to feel so much smoother and just play better. This APU, this mini PC, runs like a dedicated graphics card with nearly a last-gen workstation CPU in it, and does all of this while sipping less power than a game console and running quietly. So this thing really has impressed me. Actually, I also have to say that it's maybe the snappiest PC I've ever used. I mean, I'm really not kidding here. It boots games like almost instantly. It boots up into Windows 11 quicker than any laptop or desktop that I've used, and just everything through going through folders and opening stuff is, again, probably the snappiest desktop that I've used. So look, if you're interested in this fantastic product, please follow the directions below in the description to both support the channel and make sure that you're getting the best price possible on it. It really did impress me, and if you're interested, just clicking on those links and checking it out helps the channel a ton. But of course, getting it with the links below helps even more. So check out the Minis Forum Elite Mini AI 370 today. All right, Compressed AI Blocks writes in and says, since RDNA 4 and Blackwell will be kicking off the new year, what are your personal favorite cards from Lovelace and RDNA? 3. 7800 XT and 4070 get my vote. So yeah, I think we've been doing a more forward looking than I expected instead of looking back at 2024. So let's try to look back a little bit. Although this was kind of a year of Super being new and then just tons of rumors about the next year. So I guess I can forgive myself a little. But like, what are some of your favorite graphics cards from this past generation from AMD and Nvidia? Or do you hate all of them? I don't know.
Well, so I kind of from AMD, I like the 7900 GTE. I think is cool because it's
GRE.
Sorry, GRE. I mistyped here.
It's fine.
The GRE, because it's such a beast, and it was a pretty big drop in price and stuff as well. So that's an awesome graphics card. I like that a lot. And then I also have been, so in my system at home, I have a 4070 that I use just purely because it uses very little power for the performance that you get from it. So I've been happy with that as well. It's been working super well, and I got like better than 3080 performance, but with like half the power draw. So my apartment wasn't getting super hot in the summer anymore, and that made me happy. So I agree with the 4070 announcement as well. What about you?
If I have to pick one from each of them, it would 6500 XT. No, I'm just kidding. I think honestly, you know what? I'm not going to be afraid to say it. It's 4090. I mean, I don't like that all the pricing shenanigans with it becoming over $2,000, but there was a narrow amount of time, not that narrow, where you could get it. You could get it probably for 16 or 1800. And I'm just glad it actually delivered the performance that I was told they were going to deliver.
That's true.
I mean, just absurd amounts, like 60% better performance than a 3090 Ti while using less energy. I know it's a 450 watt TDP, but I do think it's an interesting card in that, yes, it can use 450, but if your frame rate is capped, it's actually more efficient than AMD, at least this generation. And I just think that's like actually delivering something with, 100 teraflops if you overclock it. And like, at least it's not $5,000 and at least it delivered. And then from AMD, I guess 7800 XT is my real answer.
Okay.
Because I think they finally figured out what people want. Make it $499, make it deliver high-end performance, and they did it, and it sold very well. I'm told that it's still to this day one of the best-selling cards at like Micro Centers and stuff, people I talk to. Having said that, this isn't one of my favorites, but I like what it represents, is the 7600 XT bringing 16 gigabytes to a new card below 350. It's not the best. It's better if it's closer to 300. New generation's almost out, so it's like, even Battle Mage can look good sometimes compared to it, but finally it wasn't 8 gigabytes below $400. And I just think that kind of broke the glass ceiling on we now have options below 400 and it doesn't need to be a last gen card. So I was happy to see that finally.
Yeah. And I also want to add that I like the 6600 a lot. I know it's a generation older, but that card was a beast.
And it's like 180 now or something.
Yeah.
Like ultimately, if you're in 1080p, I don't really see a point in getting anything else because that is how strong. I mean, it's like what, around a 2080s performance, maybe 2070 Super's performance. And it's like 1080p is pretty easy to run now.
Yeah.
I mean, like I said, a 6400 at low settings can do above 100 hertz sometimes even, as long as the game isn't graphically that hard to run. But so I think I do like that because there was a while there during the pandemic where there was just nothing that cheap. And I think that's just something we can at least celebrate. I guess you could say this really happened in 2023, but in 2024, prices really have gone down for the mid-range and low end. Not on the 4090, I know, but on everything else. And it is about time that happened.
No, for sure. It's been several generations at this point, so it's good. I'm curious to see how people react to the next GPU generation. If sentiment has if people have kind of gotten over the base outrage, and that because I feel like every generation has just been outrage leading into outrage. So maybe it's mellowed a bit. We'll see. I'm curious to see.
I think what it comes down to is how greedy does Nvidia decide to be? My guess would be pretty greedy.
Yeah.
But if AMD, and I've been hinted at that this might happen, if AMD looks at Battle Mage and goes, well, look, it's sold out. It's the only way to get it right now is like $400 from China. I don't think they made a lot of them. They even said publicly they didn't make a lot of them. But I have to imagine AMD looks at that and goes, all right, we can't be completely stupid with RDNA 4 because they will at least make us look dumb.
Yeah.
And I mean, let me bring that up now just because we're kind of organically getting to this part of the conversation. Bacon House Collective writes in and says, which product vertical are you most excited for in 2025? The $500 GPU market needs this. I think he bushes the sentence here. Needs coming via 8800 Radeon card. I think he's saying the $500 market needs RDNA 4. And he says, APUs are creating monstrously powerful mini PCs, though, at the same time. There's also new handhelds and CPUs coming out as well. For me, my answer is those, I guess, APUs. But I think most gamers will be excited if RDNA 4 drops. It is $500. It is a 7900 XTX or 4080 Super in performance. I think that could blow things away. But what do you think?
Yeah, that sounds good. I agree.
Where do you think here's the more interesting question. How do you think the average sentiment on the market will be because I think this is conceivable, this happens.
Okay.
What if NVIDIA launches a 5090, 32 gigabyte, some 512-bit, just absurdity, and it's $2,500. And it's like, they're like, so what? It's 60% stronger than a 4090 for 50% more. Buy it or don't buy it. But then at the same time, there's a $500 card as strong as a 4080 Super. Do you think the overall sentiment would be good? Because I would argue what we really need is cheaper mid-range. We don't need I think we talked about this last year. That we don't need the. But do you think the sentiment would become more positive because there's been so much negativity lately?
Yeah.
If we had at least good launches in the mid range, or I don't know, what if the 5080 is $1,400? Wouldn't surprise anyone, I don't think. Like, where do you think people would be thinking about PC gaming in a world where, like, all right, we had some wins here, but there's still $1,400 80 cards?
So I think it depends on how the launches are staggered. So if we're just presented with a $5 million 5090, I think people are going to be outraged. But I think if they go, here's a $5 million 5090, but on the budget end, there's something that you can get, or not budget, but like lower down, there's something that you can get excited about. I think people would be more willing to accept that, like, okay, sure, it's an oil baron graphics card, and at least we're also being catered to. So I think it depends on how they handle the launch. Yeah.
I agree. And like, which one comes out first? And like, yeah, that's a good point, because I remember when Lovelace was announced, Nvidia, they just come out and they just do them all at once. They're just like the 4090, and the specs were insane. And then it goes $1,600. And I remember just sitting there and going, oh, $1,600. I thought it was going to be $2,000. Okay. And then it just goes the 4080, 16 gigabyte, $1,200. And then I just started laughing. I was like, well, that happiness was quick. And then it goes 40, 80, 12 gigabyte, 900. I honestly fell out of my chair laughing.
Yeah.
Because it was just like this. We're not really raising prices much, and then yes, we are.
Yeah, you thought we weren't terrible, but no, we got you.
Wait 1 second, let us finish the sentence. You know, it's like, so I think you're right. Like, if they come out and they're like, there's a $2,500 or $2,000 possibly 5090, and then after that they say $1,200 5080 still a lot, but then they go like $800 5070 Ti, $400 5060 12 gigabyte. But if all they do is announce a $1,400 5080 and 5090 is like $2,000, and then don't even tell you what the others are going to cost, yeah, I think there will be outrage. I will say though, if AMD's already announced a really price competitive card, maybe people won't care that much, but that has to be announced first.
Yeah. So yeah, I think that's kind of the main thing that they have to get right, is they need to be, because transparency is so important with this stuff, right? People need to understand what's happening, and then they might be more willing to accept it.
All right, well, I want to shift gears here to something that hasn't had that much transparency, and that is Intel. So I don't know where you want to go with this, but I have like my Intel summaries here of stuff that's happened this year, and it has been a bad year for Intel. Yeah. I mean, wow. Raptor Lake had a ring bus flaw, and there were oxidation issues. And then I heard they canceled the 8+32 version of Arrow Lake. Beast Lake's canceled. A lot of the future architectures, I've been told, are canceled. At the same time, there's something called Griffin Cove, which could be good. Okay. Lunar Lake was good, but I think a very short-lived minor oddity that's cool. It wasn't really something that's taken over the mobile market. And man, Arrow Lake launched to probably the worst CPUs reviews I've seen in my lifetime. I mean, since I've been paying attention. So we got Meteor Lake, Raptor Lake issues, Lunar Lake, Arrow Lake rumors. Like, just how do you feel about Intel and their future? And what thoughts come to mind about how you reacted to all of this news this year?
Yeah, I mean, it's been pretty funny. I don't know. It's kind of like watching the bully at your school 10 years later just drunkenly soil themselves on stage. You know, it was quite cathartic in that way. But at the same time, it's like we're technically losing a competitor. Or, you know, it's AMD has got pretty free reign. So there's a bit of an aftertaste there. But at least, you know, for Intel's sake, it's been a complete dumpster fire. But right at the end, they brought Battle Mage out, and people were excited about that. So, you know, there was a little bit of redemption at the at the end of it for them. But yeah,
I mean, we'll see. I do think there is a part of me that thinks a lot of the Battle Mage stuff, though, is just people wanted to win. So, you know, that's how we're going to take it. But and again, just full disclosure here, like, I know that they're losing money on each one sold, and that they haven't made a lot of them. And it is kind of, I have compared it to the Ampere launch. of like, because the only way you can get it right now is above MSRP, and they don't even stock it at like most Micro Centers or Best Buy. So I just think that, people wanted to win, so we're rooting for the underdog. But at the same time, it's like, I can't imagine that when everything is announced at CES, if people go to Newegg and Battlemage still isn't there, is it really going to help the market that much, though?
Yeah.
But again, I think that's something we just have to wait and see what happens, though. As pleasantly as we can, though, I really need, what was your react? Maybe we'll skip Meteor Lake, because they pretend that launched last year. What was your reaction to the Raptor Lake issues?
Yeah, I mean, they handled it so poorly as well, because there was such a lack of transparency for a long time around it, and it's just they pretty much couldn't have handled it worse. And it was, I guess it kind of makes sense, because it was such a disaster that they were just terrified to have to own up to it. But yeah, it's wild. It's like 2 generations of CPUs basically that have just been written off by yeah.
Yeah, I know. And let's check right now, because I think it's worth quantifying how bad it actually is. Oh, they got one in the top 10. Okay. It is number 10. I'm looking at Amazon bestsellers, and AMD is 9 out of the top 10 and 13 out of the top 14. There is just the i7 12700K there. Okay. And then you scroll down and you're like, some people, number 16 bestseller is the 12600K. The 12700KF is number 19. But then look at the price. Number 2 is the 9800X3D. It's like, why isn't it number 1? Well, because it's going for $738 on Amazon right now, and it's still number 2. Whoa. And then the 12700K is $200. The i5 is $150, which I would say is actually a good deal. Yeah. Especially because it's Alder Lake, so it's not going to break. Yeah. And it's like, it's shocking how just dominated by AMD this is. And any ray of light is like, yeah, but the only reason this i5 is there is because they're selling it for like $140 or something. So I don't know. I mean, actually, I think this would probably then this, because I think my answer, we'll see if you agree. Low Res Gamer writes, and it says, which company or product line do you think had the biggest change in mind share in 2024? Pick a biggest gainer and a biggest loser. Otherwise, the whole discussion will be about Intel. Well, yeah, okay. So you know what I'm going to say. Intel CPU's mind share it's just below Ryzen now, and not way below. It's just shocking to me.
Yeah. I mean, it must be pretty weird for Intel, because they did this to AMD not that long ago. I mean, it was like a decade ago. But so, how the mighty have fallen. It must be, and I'm sure AMD's loving it. I'm sure Sue's having a great time.
Yeah, it's just so crazy. I mean, another thing we have to discuss, which maybe we just start transitioning in a hybrid fashion into that now, is you brought up Zen 5's horrible launch as well. And everyone's saying, well, Zen 5's AMD's doomed. And it's like, I don't know. It kind of seems like Zen 5 had one of the worst launches I've seen, or the worst handled, I thought. And then Air Lake said, oh, hold my beer. And then AMD kind of fixed it with updates, and Zen 5's dominating sales charts now. I mean, what has this roller coaster been like for you to watch this?
Yeah, I mean, it's been really entertaining. This kind of thing's always fun, because it's it's just such a roller coaster of emotion. I mean, that's literally what you were saying. Because with AMD as well, it was such a quick turnaround, because it was it like a week after the initial launch of negative reviews that the Windows updates and stuff just fixed the CPUs.
It helped a lot. I would say it took a few updates, but like there was like a latency fix between the CCDs, then a Windows update, and then games got updated. So yes, over about 3 weeks, it just turned into, all right, look, AMD clearly misrepresented the gaming performance. I think they did. I think, yes, there's games where it's 20% better than Zen 4, but I think they should have just been honest that most of the IPC was applying to non-gaming workloads. And they should have been, but it went from being 2% better to 5-ish% better with higher boost clocks. And then the 9800 X3D came out and was what people expected it to be, at least relative to the 7800 X3D. And yeah, it in just a month. And then Arrow Lake reviews came out, and it was like, well, if you thought Zen 5% was bad, get ready for Arrow Lake negative 2.85%. And it just turned into this weird situation where people thought AMD was doomed to. Intel all of a sudden is 30% behind AMD in gaming performance because Raptor Lake's actually better than Arrow Lake. I don't know if it still is after updates, but I don't know. It's such a weird change of events there.
Yeah, no, it really is.
Quick Jumper writes in, did Intel launch anything good on desktop since Alder Lake? Like, Raptor Lake was solid until we learned it was breaking. I'm looking at this, and this is basically give or take bulldozer level catastrophes happening here. Like, it's more of a miracle Intel has the money to function at this point. Yeah, we'll see. I mean, Pat Gelsinger's out of because of this. I mean, I loved Alder Lake. I recommended it over Zen 3. I still think an i5 from Alder Lake for like 150 is a good deal. Because what's even competing with it at that point? But I don't know. It's hard for me to see. I like the Raptor Lake i7, but then they started breaking. I think Lunar Lake is good, but that's not desktop. I don't even know if I have a question here for you. Like, I just I guess let's try to make it more positive. What do you think Intel has to do to turn around their mind share? And is there anything you think they really can do, or do you think it's going to be years of work?
Well, I guess it depends on how long it takes them to make a good product. Is there any ETA on when we're going to get not a dumpster fire of a CPU out of them? Because I think, like people are pretty fluid with this stuff. Like, if we all have collective amnesia, we forget really quickly. So if they bring out a really competitive product, I think people are willing to get in on that train. I mean, I guess it depends. A bunch of their CPUs did catch on fire. That's not great.
That's the thing. It's like, oh my God, why did it have to be both? Like, this is the worst time. If this would have happened with Haswell, people would have still bought Haswell, because what are they going to buy? Piledriver? But this is happening at a time where it's like, and I saw this in reviews, people are like, we're still not sure about Arrow Lake because now we have to wait 6 months to see if it'll break. And I don't know. Also, I mean, what a time to switch to the Ultra naming. This is when we're changing the legendary i7 branding that sells itself. Ultra Meteor Lake, and I guess Lunar Lake's okay, but then also Arrow Lake. Like, so everyone's going into stores, and if they Google what's Intel Ultra, everything's like bad reviews. I almost wonder if I'd laugh. I don't think they're going to do this at all, but I would really laugh hard if like Panther Lake comes out and they just go back to i7, just pretend Ultra never happened.
I mean, that would be better, because the Ultra naming scheme is so confusing. They really did make it worse. So let's hope so. Fingers crossed.
Yeah. I'm tired of saying Ultra 7. Woody Chang writes in and says, what was the best product of 2024? I'm going to say 9800 X3D, but we have to remember that contrasted with a terrible Zen 5 non-X3D launch. So to be honest, maybe Hawkpoint is my choice by some weird way. It's the first time in a long time that I felt that I had enough power, portability with enough GPU for a low-end AAA gaming experience. So just in general, what's the best thing, not just from the generation, but like what actually launched this year that you think was the best product?
So I gave this a thought, and but before the video as well, and I had a tough time coming up with something because I feel like, no, I did come up with a thing. I just remembered. So I am really excited about the 5700 X3D, because the fact that AMD, because that actually came out in July, and the fact that AMD is still launching AM4 CPUs that are competitive and interesting, I think is cool.
Yeah, it's funny too, because this is a conversation that's come up like from listeners on Broken Silicon asking questions to me and Dan. Like, do you think Zen 4, like, will there be a 7600 X3D that's around forever? And my answer was probably not, because it uses the same node as Zen 5. It's on the same socket as Zen 5. And in the meantime, I've heard that Zen 3 was just so popular with like server that they're still ramping up Zen 3 production. It's actually still increasing. Okay. And that is why we get all these Zen 3 products, because they have to do something with the yields that can't be epic. And so I think they're just like, yeah, I don't know if it only makes 20% margin. We need to dump these somewhere.
Yeah.
5700X, put Vcache on it, and it's actually still competitive with like Raptor Lake sometimes. And it's like,
yeah.
which means it's competitive with Arrow Lake. So that's an interesting answer. I was going to say 9800X 3D, but I think I might agree with you. I think the fact that there's just this one $90, $200 thing you can get with a $50 motherboard, and it games at like 200 frames per second a lot of the time. I think I agree. I think that's probably the best thing about this year is that stuff remained around and remained cheap.
No, for sure.
All right. Now let's move to this. I bet this one will be something you have something to say too.
Okay.
Clean Sweep writes in, Valve offers to make you two the official consultants for the Steam Machines 2. And as part of the deal, puts you in charge of improving Steam Hardware Survey. Oh, Steam Hardware Survey. What would you change to make Steam Machines 2.0 success? I think the first part is an inside joke with the channel. But so let's just go to the second part. What do you think the Steam machine should be? What should Valve try to do? I mean, there's really a lot of options here, but like both what are you hoping for and what would you tell Valve to do with this?
Well, I was actually when I kind of wrote down stuff about this question, I more leaned towards the Steam hardware survey.
Do that first.
Well, because when are we gonna get CPU SKUs in the Steam hardware survey? The whole just cores and frequency is useless. I need better information. And I had a question for you about it because I made a video pretty recently using Steam hardware survey data. And I had people emailing me saying that they don't report AMD GPUs. Mm-hmm. So is that a thing that happens? How much?
There's no way to really report. There's no way to really completely prove it. But all right. The first thing I'll tell you is one of those things where it's like, look, you can choose to believe me or not, whatever. But someone I know, this is a person who's often a source of mine, who's an industry veteran. This is someone that you might, well, it's like go into exactly what they do. You know? But this is someone that knows a lot of people, and that's why they make money. And this person told me that they know that Valve wishes they never would have done this, but because they keep doing this, they think they have to keep doing this. And that they kind of lament that a lot of firms use the Steam hardware survey as the gold standard. When really you just have to like do the legwork of like looking at production and shipping and where the cards and the CPUs going. And that's very hard to do. Because I mean, I've always been told, and I think I've noticed it anecdotally, that Nvidia has a flag. There's something there where if you have an Nvidia or an Intel system, it wants Steam to survey you. And it tends to survey Intel and Nvidia people more often, especially because, and this isn't nefarious, this is just what happens, of internet gaming cafes in Asia. If they buy up, these weird cards like the 1065 gigabyte in bulk, and then every time someone logs in on that internet cafe PC, it scans it and says, this is a different gamer. You're double, triple, quadruple, 10 times counting. So, it's very hard. I stay away from the Steam hardware survey because, like you say, I mean, it's questionable how useful some of that info really is anymore. But also, like, it's just weird jumps. And I've had someone like really suggest to me, like, okay, all of the sudden the 4060 is now the number one card and it changed in 1 week. It didn't slowly move up. All the internet gaming cafes switched to the 4060. So it's hard to say how off it is. And if all of it is off, it's just without a third party, how do we know how accurate it is? Because there are a lot of questions that get raised.
So anecdotally, from my experience, in terms of when I get surveyed, because I have a lot of hardware configurations that I set up and then get surveyed. I haven't noticed, because I like of the last 3 I can remember the Steam hardware survey. So I also skew the data because, but so of the last 3, they were AMD based systems that it asked, but that's like purely anecdotal. Like that doesn't mean anything.
And yesterday it surveyed my Strix system. What else? So that's technically AMD. And I think I updated Windows, but then it surveyed my 4090. So I don't really know. That's something that's been suggested to me, though. But like I said, it's hard for me to like, because then you would go, well, would you really say Nvidia is half of what they say? No, I don't know. I don't know. I've just had people raise those questions to me before.
Okay. No, so I just wanted to bring that up.
Yeah. So, and usually, and anecdotally, I would say a year ago, it was usually Nvidia, but it hasn't asked me for a year. And then just now it asked me on an AMD system and an Nvidia. So I don't know. And maybe that's something they're working on. But moving forward, what do you think Valve should do with the Steam machines?
Well, I think an easy thing for them to do is not what they did with the first ones, and then they're off to a good start. I don't know. So in terms of Steam machines, what is the kind of prevailing theory about what they want to achieve with it? Because I think that's an important thing to answer before.
I don't have any insider information on that, so this is just my opinion. What do they want to achieve? I feel like what Valve should want to achieve is trying to more and more every day make two things more of a reality. Number one, people don't want to use the Epic launcher. They don't want to use the Ubi. Make people pay for it on Steam, even if it costs more. Even if they gave you, I don't know what, GTA 5 for free on the Epic launcher. Make them want to boot it from Steam, or I think, which now uses Rockstar, which is very annoying, actually.
That's terrible,
on PC. Yeah. And by the way, because I tested an old APU here, I forgot which one it was. Maybe an Ace Magic, actually, like a mini PC. And I was like, well, this thing has Atom, not Atom cores, but like the only little cores, weak integrated Intel graphics. There's no way this is going to run Metro Exodus. But maybe I could try Max Payne 3, and I eventually got it working. But to get through the Rockstar launcher that you're forced to use was the biggest nightmare on earth.
It's the worst. I use GTA 5 semi-regularly, and it's I hate it so much. I stopped testing with it for about a year just because of the Rockstar launcher. Because I also I can't remember making a login for it, and then it uses completely different email accounts and login information than what I normally use for my gaming base.
I thought it would just clone my Steam stuff or my PlayStation info, but I had to like go back and dig up whatever the hell my Rockstar account was from Red Dead Redemption 1 or something.
Yeah. So it's the worst. Yeah, if Steam. But then again, we're advocating for a complete monopoly on.
I know.
Which is, that also feels weird.
But it's a different. If they get there by making the best product, should we be mad at them?
But it's what happens once they're a monopoly. So if you make the best product to become the monopoly, and then you just become an unhinged psychopath and abuse your customers, like it's. But then again, Valve has a history of not doing that. They're pretty benevolent as far as companies go.
I think their perception and the fact that they're not doing that is the only thing keeping them alive, because Microsoft's tried to push them off Windows a dozen times. They keep doing the Xbox Live Store, games for Windows. Like behind the scenes, there were rumors that I remember reading on Semi-Accurate or something that said that like Microsoft keeps trying to find a way to push Steam off of Windows and it keeps not working. So I think they know they have to be nice so that people keep supporting them on a competitor's operating system, which is something PlayStation doesn't need to deal with. They've got their own console. No one's pushing them off of there or something like that. Same with Nintendo. So, but you're touching on, I think the two things I think Valve should be trying to do, no matter how they do it, is make it so people want to use Steam. Make it so that companies bend the knee and just put their game on Steam instead of Origin or something.
Yeah.
Make it easy for them. Make it worth it. Say, we'll host your servers. Our servers are more efficient than whatever you're going to build, EA. And then, and then number two would just be making it, if they can get there, so gamers don't feel like they have to use Windows to play a game. Because that is, I believe, the Trojan horse they're trying to do with the Steam Deck, where like, and I think they may have said this in an interview, like a lot of people buy Steam games now because they're like, well, eventually maybe I'll get a handheld. If I get a handheld, I can't play it if it's on Uplay, but I can get it if I bought it on Steam. So I'm going to make sure I get, even if I have to pay extra for it, I'm going to get the Steam version. So however they do it, Valve needs to keep trying to make it so their OS is a genuine competitor to Windows, and that devs want to be on Steam. And the more they do that, unless they put Microsoft out of business, which I don't see happening, I do think we'll probably be fine with competition, though. And actually, maybe that would force Windows to start working.
Yeah. I think the most important thing for Valve to do is they need to integrate the CS2 loot boxes straight into the front page of the operating system so that they can just maximize that gambling profit. I think that's if they can do that, then I'm happy. You know, then they've won.
That's what they would do if they killed Windows. Is that it would be like what Windows is doing now, where the second you try to install it, they're like, you have to sign in and buy Microsoft 365, nerd.
Yeah. Buy 15 CS2 loot boxes, otherwise you're not allowed to use it. The day Microsoft goes out of business.
But I'm wondering what you think about performance, because personally, if I were to advise Valve, I would just say I don't know what the Steam Deck 2's performance is going to be. I do know for a fact it's AMD again, which surprised no one. Whatever it is, right now they have an 8 compute unit, 4-core Zen 2. Let's just say the next one is a 8-core or 12-core Zen 6 and 24 compute unit RDNA 5 thing. Take that, make it efficient for handheld, and then just put it in like a Vita TV box, if that makes sense. Mini PC box, and clock it faster because it's like a mini PC. Then actually, let me just pull this out just for the visual demonstration. Like, if they can just take whatever the Steam Deck 2's APU is and clock it faster and just put it in a box like this, that's what the Series S was supposed to be. So do that, and as long as it's as good as the PS5, kind of, or better, with more choice, and as long as you can sell that for $400 or $500 or less, I think that's enough to like threaten Xbox and like maybe be like the minimum, because that's kind of what the Steam Deck did with handhelds. It, like, God, they were so bad before it. Like, they just didn't work. I remember Linus Tech Tips video where he's like, this thing just doesn't work. Like, it was like, I think an Ice Lake handheld, and they're like, this works. It boots games. You have a unified operating system. If you want to make a good handheld, this is the standard. If they could do that with like a budget PC, so they're like, look, I don't know what everyone else is doing, but if you can't beat this $500 box that we're selling and mass producing and price performance, don't bother making a budget PC, boutique builders that comes with like, a 1030 or something silly.
Yeah. And I mean, I like the whole operating system thing is so appealing because the Steam OS on the handheld is so good. I love the operating system on the Steam Deck. So yeah, I mean, that all sounds very appealing.
Yeah, so I don't know how much it is about the performance. Honest to God. I think as long as they can give you an experience similar to a PS5, like, I don't think it's crazy at all that what was a $500 console in 2020 can be a $300 mini PC in 2026. And if there's a bare minimum there, I think it could be very compelling, and if you could make that the most popular gaming PC, or like it's like kind of like a 1060 situation where it's like, well, this is like a fifth or a tenth of PC gamers use this, then they can't pull this thing where they're like, well, DRM, because we're preventing hackers, it won't run on Linux, then they'd have to support it. Once you do that, you get all games to support Linux. That's what I'm guessing they're going to go for.
That instantly terrified me, the idea of having to use Linux, because I've not had good experience.
But their version of Linux, right?
No, that's true. Yeah, their version would be, because that is what SteamOS is on the Steam Deck. So that would be that would be really cool, having a properly usable, and I know a lot of people who use Linux say that it is properly usable at this point,
isn't.
But
I don't think it is.
But a properly usable version of Linux for gaming would be awesome. Having alternatives to Windows is amazing. Like, I don't think anybody is particularly in support of Windows. We just kind of use it because we don't really have much of an option. So yeah, that would be really cool. And I think the hardware ecosystem or market at the moment is completely different to what it was when the first Steam machines came out. Because back then you couldn't have, like, low power CPUs and iGPUs and stuff didn't have the performance to run games convincingly in any way, but now they do. So I know I said that they just need to not do what they did with the first gen Steam machines, and then it would be great. I think that they wouldn't need to change that much. They just need to use modern hardware and a shiny OS, and then yeah, they'd be good.
Which is what they were lacking before, though.
Yeah.
There wasn't this custom APU. I think some of the early Steam machines had like Titans in them for some reason. Like, and if in addition to this box, though, they just say, here's the Steam OS. I think Lenovo's rumored to finally be using it soon with their new handheld.
Okay.
Like, just go,
that's cool.
Yeah, look, this is our base. This is the default. The default is this $300 box that we're not making much profit on because it's a Trojan horse to make you buy all your games on Steam. Like, that is the console model we're doing. But if you want to HP make a $600 box that has a 5060 in it, you can run Steam OS. And I think, again, once they get the buy-in, if they could take market share and then get OEMs to get on board with their own versions, then you get to this situation where gamers don't need to use Windows if they don't want to. And nothing will fix Windows faster than it not being the default for everyone.
For sure, yeah. And if they can also integrate some proper ARM support in there, that would also be amazing.
Yeah.
Because of that efficiency would be great.
All right, so I think we got through most of the things we were going to discuss here today. I'm just like kind of looking over everything else. We skipped over like Zen 5 Strix, but it's like, whatever, I think. But I guess a final question I might have for you to try to summarize all of this is, how would you summarize what PC gaming was like in 2023? How would you summarize it for 2024? And what do you think and hope it will be for 25?
Wow, that is...
Oh, I think I have an answer too.
That's a hard question because I think that this year, one of the big changes for me, at least, and this is I haven't given this much thought, so it's not necessarily don't hold me to this answer, but I think that this is the first year in a while where there were a bunch of games that came out that I was excited about, which wasn't necessarily the case for 2023.
What were your favorite games this year?
So I was really excited about Stalker 2 coming out. I've been enjoying that a lot. I mean, it's janky, but it has to be janky, otherwise it's not a Stalker game. Like, complaining about jank in a Stalker game.
I liked the other Stalker, so you do recommend this one?
Yeah. It's pretty. If you liked the jank of those games, that's definitely still present. I think aesthetically, like, the game initially starts off, it feels a little bit like a Ubisoft sandbox, which is like not a good thing. But the game, it really sells its atmosphere very well, and then it opens up and it feels good. A bunch of patches came out that they fixed a bunch of things. They updated the AI. They made the game less brutal, and Stalker, they build a universe really well, and they did it in this one as well. So I'd recommend it. It is going to choke out your PC though. Be prepared for that. It is very poor. Well, it's an Unreal Engine 5 game, so it's not surprising. But yeah, so in terms of games this year, I've been excited about some stuff which turned out decent, which is a bit of a change from the last year for me, at least. And hopefully more of that happens next year. And not outrage about PC hardware would be cool. If we actually get stuff to be excited about that isn't just, corporate boot on the neck, then yeah, that would be cool.
Yeah, we'll see if this is the most naive thing I've ever said, but I would say 2023 was just constant outrage at not getting what we, kind of like what I said before, enough of what we wanted to make up for how much 21 and 2022's pricing sucked.
Yeah.
And how every game was delayed and full of bugs because people were dealing with a pandemic and reorganizing their entire countries sometimes, and supply chains. And then 2023, it was like the beginning of the relief, but still mad. 2024, it's kind of here. I mean, look, I know, that the 6800 XT, or the 7800 XT is only like 10-15% faster than the 6800 XT, and it should be called the 7800 XT should be called the 7700 XT. Let's be honest. But at the same time, it was 500. The 6800 XT did launch for 650 and often sold for 1,000. And it was like, from that perspective, price performance has become radically better. We've seen crazy deals, 6800s for 350. The only reason Battle Mage is 250 is because, honestly, 3060s are already kind of 250. It had to be 250 to make any sense, in my opinion.
Yeah.
And I think this year was the beginning of just, it's finally you can see the change. And what I'm hoping for is that the change has started, in next year, if not next year, certainly 26, is when we're going to see the market just shift into a new market. Like, there's going to be, it's less about like PlayStation versus Xbox forever. And it's more about PlayStation versus 10 different boutique consoles that actually work pretty well. And like, the Steam Deck's going to be competing with all these other handhelds, whether it's a Switch 2 or, again, GPD makes some pretty cool stuff now. And all of a sudden, Mini's forum, a mini PC company, is making Surface tablet competitors. And for the price, it's pretty dang good. And, maybe we'll have Nvidia, if Intel is not competing with AMD and that it was sucked this year, guess what? Nvidia's going to compete next year. AMD is going to feel compelled to be a little aggressive because Battle Mage gave them the kick they needed to not be greedy. My hope is that next year is we're out of the awkward phase and we're into there are more competitors phase and they're forced to compete again. That's my hope for next year. And I think,
that would be amazing.
And I think we're starting to see some of that, Battle Mage and, rumors about Nvidia CPUs. I think it's time for this to stop being binary markets where it's like who's the two and which one's better. It's going to be like, well, did you know you can actually make your smartphone do this? And it's like everything's technically competing on the edges.
Yeah. So I think with that, the biggest gray horse, is that the term? Blue horse? The
dark horse, if it's unexpected.
Dark horse, yeah. The biggest dark horse is going to be Apple. Apple's going to come in. They're going to bring in some, because I mean that new mini, the new Mac Mini is a monster. Like, that thing is crazy powerful for what it is.
For Apple's pricing, we would usually expect that to be 1,000.
Yeah. So they're going to come in. They're going to launch some umbilical cord that you can plug a graphics card up its butt, and then we're going to game on Apple. Actually, I really don't want that to happen because I really, really don't want Apple to get involved in gaming too much. They keep saying it, but it's because they're just going to make it absurdly expensive. And when they go and with their massive island of money buy up all the game publishers and then make you buy a $4,000 MacBook to play, I don't know, Counter-Strike 2 with, that's not going to be a good time.
I don't know if they would be able to do that though, because, and there'd be some people that get mad at me for saying this, but I'm glad that Microsoft tried to make a gaming monopoly. They tried to buy every studio, and there were so many people that were just like fatalistic about it. And like, well, of course the big corporation's going to win because I'm black-pilled. And it's like, no, it failed. And it sucks for the studios that Microsoft seems to have just bought them up and then slit their throats and kicked them out. Like, I don't know what they're doing with half of these studios. They buy all these studios and no games are released. But I think, again, it's the silver linings. Physical media was not killed. They failed. They did not succeed in buying up every company. And I would have to imagine that Apple would be smart enough, at least under Tim Cook still, to look at what happened with Microsoft and go, trying to buy everything can backfire.
But big pile of money, though. Big pile of money. I don't know. And the thing is, I think Microsoft, one of the biggest problems that they had wasn't a lack of resources. It was just kind of incompetence. I think that they didn't understand what gamers wanted. They were just like, ooh, gaming is a thing that makes money. So we buy these companies. And then, they don't want to listen to exactly what we want, despite us not knowing anything. Okay, well, just ruin the publisher. So Apple could potentially do this if they were less arrogant about it, but saying Apple being less arrogant about it means it's never going to happen. So, okay, no, we're good. We're probably fine. We don't have to buy MacBooks for gaming.
Yeah, that one. The other thing I'd say about Apple is I find it weird that they still haven't found a way to have all games supported on Mac.
Yeah, no, it still doesn't
they're
work.
a juggernaut. I mean, it was funny. Me and Dan were talking about like, laptop market share on a recent die shrink, and it was like, well, what's really the best selling is AMD. And I look, oh, at least when I checked Amazon bestsellers, the best selling laptop was an AMD laptop on Amazon with Mendocino, so the budget 4-core Zen 2. And then after that, it was like, oh yeah, that's right. Most people don't buy $1,000 laptops. The top 20 were like Atom PCs, budget AMD, and ARM laptops that do not use the X Elite, use stuff we've never heard of.
Yeah.
And it's either that or MacBooks.
Yeah.
So many MacBooks in the top 10 sellers on Amazon. And you're like, they're holding a decent amount of market share here, even though they're the only ones that make MacBooks. I don't understand why they can't get all games to just work on Mac. Like, why is this? And I know that people applaud their emulation efforts, but it's still like, it's Apple. They own half of the earth. Like, why can't they make it work? And I mean, I'll raise my hand. Honestly, I'm so sick of Windows. If every game worked on my Apple, I might get a MacBook just to not have to deal with it anymore.
Yeah, so I think genuinely they probably don't care that much. I know that they keep saying that they do. I think they've noticed that if they mention gaming in a keynote, that it gets them more coverage somehow. But I don't think they genuinely care that much, because otherwise they wouldn't still be using Resident Evil 4 as the example of the game that runs. Like, it's so, oh, you like hardcore gamers can play this 8-year-old game. Yeah, it's a good game, but it's game. We need more than just game. But the thing is, I agree. MacBooks, Apple Silicon is amazing. I think it's a really cool piece of technology. The problem for me with gaming on a MacBook, though, is it's the MacBook, because its display may be high refresh rate, but it's got horrible input latency.
Oh, really?
So gaming on a MacBook feels really
that
not
seems
good.
So easy to not have. Why would it have high latency?
Because I think they've never had to care about it, because it's for them, it's about having a display that measures 10 billion on everything in terms of color accuracy and whatever. And that's all that's mattered. So if their displays are very like VAE and stuff, so you've got lots of smear, you've got lots of, so I've tried gaming on a MacBook several times, and the main issue for me, aside from, obviously there are no games for it, is that not the CPU or whatever, but the kind of accompanying peripheral hardware isn't good enough. So they also need to fix that to have a proper gaming laptop.
Right. And so then it remains this thing for like audio work, visual work. And there's 2 games that run really well on it, actually, but it's only 2 out of 100. And it's like, I remember people in the Moore's Law said, Discord, like saying, oh, this Mac is insane at like, what is it, $600, I think, or something. So if it's $600, and like, for example, I think on sale right now, links in the description, this mini PC, I think, is like 930 something, or like on Minis Forum. And you're like, okay, so the M4's APU is probably stronger than Zen 5 Strix, at least in terms of single threading. I don't know about multi-threading, but it's also definitely stronger with the integrated graphics perfectly used. But then I go, right, but I know this costs $400 more. That has 16 gigabytes. This is 32. That has half a terabyte. This has a terabyte. This doesn't have the input issues. The CPU is not weak. I can kind of see how they got to $600, because they're not giving you the storage or the RAM. And in some metrics, it's really not stronger. But yes, I would still have expected that, though, to be 1,000.
Yeah, because it's Apple. Like the fact that
it's close to it is price. I can justify why you'd get this instead, but that's competitive. We have to admit it's competitive.
Yeah, which is unusual for Apple. They don't do competitive, even though they still win always. But
so that's what I hope, though, is that like they do figure that out.
Yeah,
and it's like, if Sony charges $1,000 for a PS6, which I guess wouldn't be next year anyways, but if they were going to plan to, that they choose not to, because there's a Steam device, an Apple device, all of these other boutique, a Lenovo Legion console comes out of nowhere, that like Black Horse type of thing. I think next year is going to be the start of just wildly crazy stuff coming from mid-sized companies that forces the larger companies to realize, I mean, if, again, kind of like the Minis Forum V3 tablet, if you guys won't make a Surface tablet with AMD for under $1,500, we will.
Yeah, let me actually check out that Minis Forum tablet. I have not.
I think it's on sale for like $900. I did a review for it as well.
Oh, okay.
And so, yeah, I think when I see like this, boutique mini PC company out of nowhere catapult out a Surface competitor that admittedly probably isn't quite as good a build quality, but it's a third the price. I just go, I don't know. I think we're going to, you see GPD making these like mini laptops with joysticks on them.
Yeah.
I think we're going to start seeing a lot of crazy stuff next year because now you can just, this tech's there, you can just make it, so.
Yeah, no, that's exciting. That's good news.
Well, so after doing this free extended ad for one of my sponsors, it seems like, thank you for accepting that $100 bill behind the scenes to do that.
Oh, it's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Joking, of course, someone will take that seriously.
Yeah.
I don't really have anything else to discuss for this episode. I think this was another really fun one. I always appreciate you taking time right before the holidays, or I guess right before one of the holidays, some of them are already over, to talk about the previous year and the upcoming year with me. Please, unless you have anything else you want to talk about, tell people where they can find you.
Yeah, so if you search Dawid Does Tech Stuff, you can find some videos of me doing some tech stuff. I've got the like I mentioned way earlier in the video, in this chat was the video that I'm currently busy working on. I'm doing some retro gaming on, and I've been playing Black and White 2, and that is Lionhead Studios needs to figure out its legal issues so that this is a game that we can play on, not Windows XP anymore. It's so good. It's such a good game. And it was a nightmare to get that system running. So if you want to see some suffering, you can check that out.
You can check out your channel. And of course, there'll be a link in the description where people can find you as well.
Thank you.
And then, let me check the calendar. When this comes out, I believe it will be the day before Christmas Eve or Christmas Eve. So also, everybody, watching and listening, thank you for watching and listening. Hopefully you're traveling safe, or if people are traveling to you aren't getting annoyed having to host everybody, and this is calming you down a little bit. And just, have a really good Christmas season, everybody. Have a good New Year. There will be another episode out around New Year's as well with Dan. And remember to subscribe to the Moore's Laws YouTube channel. Ring the bell button so you actually get to see the content after choosing to subscribe. And then comment below, check out Broken Silicon, your podcast app of choice, and give us a review. And just do anything else you can do that I'm forgetting to shill right now that would help the channel, including joining the Patreon. All right. Thanks for watching. Thanks for listening, everybody. Have a good Christmas and New Year. This podcast was brought to you by the YouTube channel and website Moore's Law is Dead. Moore's Law is Dead and Broken Silicon are trademarks of their creator, Tom. That guy is me, and I am indeed the creator, editor, writer, and showrunner of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, videos, articles, and other media. However, it's not just me. Moore's Law is Dead is a team, with Broken Silicon co-hosted by my brother Dan, audio editing by Gerard Cortez, renders being done by the industrial designer Jean-Philippe Clermont, and special assistance is also provided by Carbon Cry and Carrie No Sugata as well. Find all of our information at www.mooreslawsdead.com on the About/Support page. In the event you do want to hire me for consulting work, hire Gerard for audio work, hire Jean-Philippe for industrial design work, or you're interested in working with Carbon Cry or Carrie No Sugata as well. You can also find our long-term sponsors on that page if you want to show them some love for putting food on our tables. Or you can also mail us some love. You can send letters or hardware donations to the following address: Moore's Law is Dead, P.O. Box 60632 in Nashville, Tennessee, zip code 37206. Although, to be honest, the best way to show Moore's Law is Dead some love is to support us on Patreon. Patrons are what makes Moore's Law is Dead content truly possible. Every month, and really every day, depending on who you're talking about, me, Gerard, Dan, and Jean-Philippe are working tirelessly to provide a steady stream of content that we could not keep doing unless we knew the work was possible without being reliant on sponsors dictating every little thing we put out. Don't get us wrong. We love our sponsors, but we love directly working for you, our fans, much more. If you have any extra money, even a couple free dollars a month, consider supporting us directly on Patreon. Those couple of monthly dollars will get you access to the exclusive podcast Die Shrink, voting on subjects of future podcast episodes, the ability to ask guests questions, and of course, access to the Moore's Law is Dead Discord full of like-minded people who I am sure would love to meet you. I am one of them. Additionally, higher tiers get access to early, ad-free episodes of Broken Silicon, the ability to ask questions in all Broken Silicon episodes and Loose Ends live streams ahead of the recording, and the entire back catalog of Moore's Law is Dead podcasts, in addition to having thanks in the credits of videos and podcasts depending on the tier, with other perks available as well. And hey, if you cannot afford to support us directly every month, please do share Moore's Law is Dead videos and podcasts with friends and family, and on social media and websites like Reddit. And give Broken Silicon a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts or your preferred podcast app of choice. All of this does really help us so much. But like I said, this podcast would not be possible without the patrons directly providing predictable and reliable support every month. And so now it is time to give a personal thanks to the greatest of the fans. The following supporters are at the 10 gigahertz or higher supported levels: Brad Medlin, Drita Foles, Z Jits, Daniel D, Deke, Nicholas Buckner, Aaron Close, Jan Rauner, Daniel Hyde, GC Ziggy, MJB1, SNES Chalmers, Jem Ferriero, Toka, Falcon Malev, Jensen Wang, Gregorius Acker, Sarcastro, Chris Rich, Evan Dingle, Compressed AI Blocks, Halbuma, Shredbird, Holden Mobley, Sammy Malas, Jordan Simkovic, Julian Leak, The Boss Haas, Jonathan, Chrysantine, Franco Frederic, Jake223, Jake Martin, Slicky, Nithra Zink, Meat and Pork, Tim Robb, Ian Clifford, Travis Gooding, Mad, Zoot Taylor, Stephen Coates, Greg, Michael McGee, Patty Cakes, Gamers Unite, Amiable Chief, Mark Mitchell, Tommy, Jamie Witters, I Should, Mark Raidmaker, James Anderson, Cole Addict, Cameron, Henry Zhang, Wesley Sager, Michelle Pell, Hexapuma, Mai Sharona, Reginald Ari, Teak Autumn, Win Wang, Winstar, Corey Leonard, James I. Raider, Little Germany, GSMMH, Shay, Milton, Melodic Warrior, Brett Jones, Chuck Glidden, Mac Daffy, Stephen Dick, Dave Schultz, Austin Haggerty, Justin Bustle, Jofit, Brian Scanlon, Hardland, Jansen, Angima, Joseph Kelly, Sleshba, Him, Sagung, Tails, 2299, Meal Valverga, Sisyphos 7771, The Forbidden Juice, Brian Wright, RB Racer, Alex Vega, Dr. J Mad, Free D, Michael Cozy, John Swin, Crystal Joe, Elbergun, Jeffrey, Gentleman, Kikum, Solarize 80, Matthew Marlowe, Brian P, Sprutnik, Hudat42, Figuk, Heguk, Cornster 671, Penta Wenta, Hal Richard, Omega Doge, Angel of Cake, Mr. Tiger, John Wick Boomstick, Porcelain Olds, Curry King, Nick Zuzmania, Sakosha, State Farm Snake, Armand Vacatura, Rai Hill Chi Bowles, and Kevin Kuntz. And of course, thank you to Sahara for the music, and have a great holiday season, everybody.